The storm raged, a torrent of rain and wind that battered the streets of Queens, New York. Under the dark sky, Sarah Miller's heart pounded as she rushed through Central Park, calling out for her son, Tommy. The same park that had once been a sanctuary for them both now seemed a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. Tommy, where are you? Sarah cried, her voice cracking. Minutes earlier, they had been sitting on a park bench, Tommy delighting in the sound of the birds, enjoying a peaceful moment before the storm came. Distant cry, barely audible over the wind, but clear enough for a mother's heart to recognize. Mommy, I'm scared. Welcome to HeartForce channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Tommy's voice broke through the chaos, and Sarah's chest tightened with panic. Every step felt like an eternity as she stumbled across the slick grass. What if she didn't get to him in time? Her thoughts flashed to the unimaginable. 5 years ago, she had lost Michael, her firefighter husband, to a tragic fire. She couldn't lose Tommy, too. Another flash of lightning illuminated the park, and that's when she saw it, a figure moving through the dark. Her heart skipped a beat, unsure whether it was friend or foe. Then, as another bolt of lightning lit up the sky, Sarah saw what it was, a dog, large and scarred, its movements sharp and deliberate. Before Sarah could even react, the dog reached Tommy, who stood perilously close to the swollen turtle pond, his unseeing eyes unaware of the danger. The dog grabbed Tommy by the sleeve, pulling him gently away from the water's edge. Sarah stumbled forward, her legs weak with relief. She fell to her knees beside Tommy, wrapping him in her arms. Tommy, wide-eyed, smiled. An angel came, Mommy. The storm had passed by the time Sarah and Tommy made their way back to their apartment in Queens. The air was damp and cool, but the weight on Sarah's shoulders felt heavier than ever. The relief of finding Tommy was quickly overshadowed by the anxiety of what was to come. The dog, Max, as she would come to know him, had saved Tommy's life in that instant, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something more complicated. As they entered their building, Sarah hesitated. She knew there was little room in their lives for more complications. Money was tight. Tommy's medical needs never stopped growing, and her job as a middle school teacher barely kept them afloat. The idea of a dog, especially one as large and intimidating as Max, living with them seemed impossible. But then Tommy spoke, his voice small but full of hope. He's my friend, Mommy. He makes the darkness less scary. The word struck Sarah deeply. Tommy had been born blind, and for all the technology they had tried, Braille books, talking computers, special programs, nothing had ever been able to fill the void of his isolation. Nothing except his mother. And now Max. Sarah had spent years trying to teach Tommy that just because the world was dark didn't mean it was broken. But Max seemed to be doing it with no effort at all. With one simple act of kindness. He had become more than a dog. He had become Tommy's eyes, his protector, his constant companion. The next few days were filled with tension, despite Sarah's attempts to keep Max at arm's length. The dog didn't leave. Every time she opened the door to leave for work or to take Tommy to school, Max was there, waiting patiently. His scarred face and determined gaze followed her every move. Then, one morning, Tommy had an appointment at the piano school. Sarah was running late, as usual, and she was on the verge of canceling when she found Tommy already there. Max had walked him to the music room, his limp barely noticeable, guiding Tommy with an extraordinary level of care. He knows the way, Mommy, Tommy had said, his face bright with excitement. He stops at all the right places, just like you do. Sarah's heart clenched. Max wasn't just a dog. He was more than that. He was something else entirely. And now, it was clear that he wasn't leaving anytime soon. But not everyone agreed. As Sarah sat in her office at school, trying to focus on her lesson plans, she received a phone call that would change everything. It was from Mr. Peterson, the building manager. His voice was tight, filled with barely contained annoyance. Mrs. Miller, he began, that dog can't stay here. Building policy clearly prohibits pets, and he's causing a disturbance. There have already been complaints about him. Sarah's heart dropped. She knew the tenants in their building didn't exactly welcome Max with open arms. But the idea of being forced to give him up, after all he had done for Tommy, was too much to bear. "I understand, Mr. Peterson," she said quietly, her fingers trembling as she held the phone. "But this dog saved my son's life. He's not just any dog. He's special." There was silence on the other end of the line. After a long pause, Mr. Peterson sighed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, but the complaints are piling up. People are afraid of him. You'll need to make arrangements to find him a new home, or we'll have to take further action." Sarah could feel the walls closing in around her. It wasn't just the apartment. It was everything. The mounting financial strain, the constant worry, the never-ending judgment from her in-laws and society. It felt like they were fighting a losing battle, and it was all on her shoulders. That night, as she sat with Tommy and Max, the full weight of her situation became clear. "Tommy," she said softly, "we might have to say goodbye to Max. I don't want to, but we might have no choice." Tommy's face fell, and he reached for Max's fur. "Please don't make him go, Mommy. He helps me see the world." Max, as if understanding, nudged Tommy's hand, his eyes full of loyalty and something more. Sarah's heart broke. She knew she couldn't let this dog go. He had already become a part of their family in a way no one else had. But the fight was only just beginning. The building was putting pressure on her, her in-laws were pushing harder than ever, and now Max was at the center of it all. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. "Max stays," she whispered to herself. "Whatever it takes." Sarah couldn't have predicted just how quickly things would escalate. It started small, with whispered complaints among the neighbors. But soon it grew into something much bigger. "That dangerous dog," they would say in hushed voices. How could she bring him here? But the worst part wasn't the building or the neighbors. It was the impact it had on Tommy. He had always been a bright, happy child, but the prejudice he faced in his everyday life was overwhelming. The taunts from other children at school, the nervous glances from adults in the grocery store, and now, even his own neighbors were turning against him. One afternoon, after school, as Tommy was playing with Max outside their building, Mrs. Peterson, the manager's wife, approached them. "You really should have that dog removed," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "What if he attacks one of the children?" Tommy, who had been playing quietly, stood up. He had heard the tone before, one of pity mixed with fear. He didn't flinch, but instead held Max's leash tighter. "He won't hurt anyone," he said firmly. "Much protection." Mrs. Peterson turned to walk away, but not before she shot a look at Sarah, one filled with judgment and accusation. "Maybe you should get rid of the dog for Tommy's sake," she muttered. The words stung. Tommy looked up at Sarah, his face filled with confusion. "Why do they hate me, Mommy?" he asked, his small voice breaking her heart. The truth was simple, yet painful. Tommy's disability made him an easy target for those who didn't understand. And Max, despite his good intentions, had become a symbol of what people feared, something different, something they couldn't control. At the same time, the pressure from her in-laws intensified. They saw Tommy's blindness as a weakness, a disability that couldn't possibly thrive in a small apartment, with a mother who was barely holding things together. They made it clear, again and again, that they believed they could give Tommy a better life than Sarah could. Richard Miller, her father-in-law, was the most vocal. "This is not the environment for a blind child," he had said. "He needs the best education, the finest resources. You can't provide that." The custody battle they had been waging for years had now taken an ugly turn. The Millers had connections, wealthy, powerful connections that seemed to influence every part of Sarah's life. Every time she thought she was getting a break, another obstacle appeared, and it always seemed to be linked back to them. And now, with Max in their lives, they were using the dog as leverage. "You can't expect us to let you raise Tommy like this," Elizabeth Miller said one day during a tense phone conversation. "It's unsafe. You've put him at risk, all for some stray dog." As the days wore on, the legal threats mounted. Sarah received formal notices from Child Services, reminding her that she was being investigated for her fitness as a mother. The constant scrutiny was eating away at her. How much longer could she keep fighting? At night, after Tommy had gone to bed, Sarah would sit by the window, looking out at the city lights, and wonder how she had gotten to this point. What had happened to the woman she once was, the confident, strong teacher, the loving wife and mother? Now, all she could see was a woman backed into a corner, fighting to keep the only family she had left. Max, for all his scars and his battle-worn body, remained steadfast. Every day, without fail, he would stay close to Tommy, his presence a silent but constant reassurance. It was as if Max understood that it wasn't just Tommy who needed saving. It was Sarah, too. One night, as Sarah lay awake, her thoughts a swirl of fear and uncertainty, she heard a soft whine from Max. She looked up to see him, standing in the doorway of Tommy's room. His eyes locked on her with an almost human intelligence. It was as if he was telling her, without words, that it would be okay. They would get through this together. "I don't know how, Max," Sarah whispered, the tears she had been holding back finally slipping down her cheeks. "But we will." The battle against the Millers, against the prejudices in her community, and against the weight of her own exhaustion seemed to reach a boiling point in the weeks that followed. Every day was filled with new threats, new complaints, and even more intense scrutiny. Tommy was often the subject of cruel whispers at school, and the neighbors who once smiled and greeted her now crossed the street to avoid even a glance. The weight of it all threatened to break her, for his right to exist in a world that constantly judged him for being different. And now, Max had become her ally in that fight. Max had shown her what true protection meant. He had shown Tommy how to walk in the world despite his blindness, how to hold his head high even when others would look away. And now, she had to protect him, too. It wasn't just the building management anymore. It wasn't just the constant, harassing phone calls from her in-laws. There was something bigger at play. News of Max's involvement in Tommy's life had spread through the neighborhood, and with it, a growing campaign of ostracism had started. Flyers were posted, warning others to stay away from Tommy. From Max, rumors spread that the dog was dangerous, that he had once been in violent situations. Sarah had heard it all, but what hurt the most was how the community, once so supportive, had turned against them. Max, the protector, the hero, was now seen as a threat. His scars, his battle-worn body, had become a symbol of fear. And Sarah couldn't understand why people were so quick to judge. Didn't they see what Max had done? Didn't they see how much he loved Tommy? One afternoon, as Sarah arrived at Tommy's school to pick him up, she was met with the worst news yet. A letter had been sent from the principal's office. Her heart sank as she opened it. The school board had decided that Max was no longer allowed on school property, citing safety concerns, despite the fact that Max had guided Tommy safely every day. Despite the fact that he had been more of a protector than any human could have been, they had decided that he was a liability. Her hands trembled as she held the letter, her mind racing. The decision was clear. Without Max, Tommy's world would return to darkness. The world that was already too hard to navigate for a blind child would only become more dangerous. And yet the system, the people around her, didn't seem to care. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Miller," the principal said, his face a mask of sympathy. "But we have to abide by the policy. It's for the safety of the children." Sarah tried to keep her composure, but the sting of betrayal cut deep. She had fought so hard to build a life for Tommy. She had tried to give him everything he needed, even when everything seemed against her. And now, they were telling her that the one thing that had made Tommy's world feel safe, the one thing that had given him the ability to live freely, was a threat. As Sarah left the school, her hands clutching the letter tightly, she felt the weight of defeat for the first time. She had fought the world for Tommy, and now the world was fighting back harder than ever. She couldn't let Max go. She wouldn't. But the pressure was mounting. Her in-laws had escalated their attacks. Her job was on the line. And now even the school, the place that had once felt like a safe haven, had turned its back on them. Later that evening, as Tommy played with Max in the living room, Sarah sat quietly at the table, her mind spinning with questions. How much longer could she hold on? Was she doing the right thing? Could she really win this battle? or had she been too stubborn to let go? Tommy's voice broke through her thoughts. Mom, Max tells me when it's time to go to bed. He knows. Sarah looked up and saw Tommy standing at the doorway, holding Max's leash. His smile as bright as ever despite the darkness that surrounded them. Max was standing beside him, watching Sarah with those deep, knowing eyes. He was more than just a dog. He was family. Thank you, Max, Sarah whispered. I don't know what we'd do without you. Max wagged his tail gently, and Sarah could swear she saw the glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He wasn't just there to protect Tommy. He was there for her too. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she was stronger than she had ever given herself credit for. She had fought for Tommy all this time. She wasn't about to give up now. No matter what anyone said, no matter what obstacles came her way, she would fight for Max. She looked at Tommy, her son, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was his mother, and she would protect him no matter the cost. The days that followed felt like an endless storm, with each new challenge more difficult than the last. Sarah's world was consumed by the custody battle, the mounting legal pressures, and a constant barrage of judgment from the people around her. The walls of their small apartment felt suffocating as she tried to balance the needs of her son, her dog, and the increasingly difficult reality of their lives. It wasn't just about keeping Max anymore. It was about showing the world, showing everyone who had ever doubted her, that she was strong enough to fight back. Tommy's resilience, his belief in Max, had given her a new sense of determination. She couldn't let them tear her family apart. Not again. Not after everything they had already lost. One afternoon, as Sarah arrived home from work, she was greeted by a new letter, this one from the building management. She opened it with a sinking feeling. The building had filed an official eviction notice. Mux, the dog who had saved her son's life, who had become a part of their family, was being blamed for everything. The letter accused her of jeopardizing the safety of the building and its tenants, and it demanded that she remove Max immediately or face legal action. The familiar weight of defeat pressed down on her chest, but something inside her snapped. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let her son feel the sting of losing his protector, his best friend. I'm not giving up, Sarah said, her voice firm as she looked at Max, who was lying on the floor beside Tommy. Max raised his head, his eyes meeting hers with unwavering loyalty. Tommy looked up from his book, his brow furrowing in confusion. Mom, what's wrong? They want to take Max away, Tommy, Sarah said, kneeling beside him. But we're not letting that happen. Max is part of our family. Tommy's face brightened, as if the idea hadn't even occurred to him. He's my eyes, he said softly, running his hand through Max's fur. He helps me see the world, Mommy. We have to protect him. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at her son. Tommy had always been her strength, but now, Max had become her rock. The dog had saved Tommy's life more than once, and he had brought joy to a life that had often been filled with hardship. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family. The next day, Sarah took a deep breath and headed to court for the final hearing in the custody battle. The Millers had pulled every trick they could to try to win, using their wealth and influence to manipulate the system. But Sarah had something they didn't, a bond with her son that couldn't be broken, and a dog who had proven time and time again that he would do anything to protect them. The courtroom was tense as Sarah sat beside her attorney, waiting for the proceedings to begin. The Millers were there, too, their smug faces hiding the cruelty beneath. Richard Miller's lawyer, a slick man in a sharp suit, stood up first, presenting their case with the precision of a surgeon. Your Honor, Mrs. Miller's decision to keep this dangerous dog in her home has resulted in the most unimaginable threats to her son's safety, the lawyer said, his voice cold. This dog, this former police dog, has a violent past, and it is clear that he poses a risk to Tommy. Sarah felt the weight of the words, but she refused to let them break her. Max wasn't a danger to Tommy. Max was his protector, his guide, his friend, and she wasn't going to let anyone take him away. The judge turned to Sarah's lawyer, who had been quietly taking notes. Ms. Miller, would you like to respond? The judge asked. Sarah stood up, her heart pounding her chest, but she stood tall. Your Honor, I am not here to ask for sympathy. I am here to fight for my son. And for my dog, she said, her voice clear and strong. Max didn't just save Tommy once. He saved him every day. He's the reason Tommy can walk out into the world with confidence. He's the reason Tommy is alive today. She turned to the Millers, who were glaring at her from across the room. You can offer him a mansion and all the money in the world, but you can't offer him the one thing I can: unconditional love. Max is part of our family. He always will be. Tommy's words echoed in Sarah's mind, the same words he had said when he first touched Max's fur. He makes the darkness less scary. In that moment, Sarah knew that she wasn't just fighting for custody. She was fighting for the right to keep her family together. The courtroom was silent as the judge considered her words. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. Based on the evidence presented, I am ordering that custody of Tommy remain with Mrs. Miller, the judge said, his voice firm. As for the dog, Max, I find that he has proven his value as a service animal, and his presence in the home is not a threat to Tommy's well-being. I will not remove Max from this family. The relief that flooded through Sarah was indescribable. She had won. Against all odds, she had won. Max could stay with them. Tommy could keep his protector. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. As she left the courtroom, she looked at Tommy, who was holding Max's leash, his face shining with happiness. "We did it, Mommy," Tommy said, his voice full of awe. "We won." Sarah knelt down and pulled Tommy into a tight embrace. "No, Tommy," she whispered. "We didn't just win. We're a family, and that's all that matters." Max stood beside them, his scarred face softening as he nuzzled Tommy's hand. He had fought for them. He had protected them. And now, their family was whole again. This story teaches us about the power of love, loyalty, and perseverance. Sarah, Tommy, and Max fought against immense odds, prejudice, legal battles, and personal sacrifice, but they never gave up on each other. It reminds us that no matter how dark the world may seem, the bonds we share with those we love and with those who love us back can light our way. Sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't the ones who wear capes, but those who stand by us when we need them most. What did you think of this story? Have you ever experienced a moment where love and loyalty triumphed over adversity? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more inspiring stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the HeartForce channel.